Hey everyone, and welcome back to this channel. I hope you're well. Thank you for the kind comments and responses on my latest video on the Wire magazine, which was fun to make and really great to rediscover some lost gems in my collection. This week, another installment of Revolutions. Okay, you know the drill, the records that I've been playing. Last weekend I went to this great record fair, which was a classical record fair in central Melbourne. It's a radio station called 3MBS, and they specialize in classical. When every 6 months they sort of like release a lot of their inventory for sale. So lots and lots of CDs, like boxes and boxes of CDs, and lots of records. And here are a couple of records that I picked up from last weekend, which I've played. This is absolutely wonderful. Martinu, Bohuslav Martinu, Czech or Czechoslovakian at the time composer. Way lesser known than for example Dvorak, but really I'm in love with these pieces. String Quartet number 5 and number 7. I picked this up kind of like, it's kind of a blind buy. I mean, a lot of classical music, you just go, well, if I don't really know, how bad can it be or whatever, and then you see string quartets, you see the Janacek quartet, you think, okay, I mean, that's a sort of gauge of quality, so I picked it up, and I am loving these two pieces. They're really spirited, beautifully, atmospheric, with a tinge of melancholia. It's very, very lovely Sunday morning music, I will say. So I picked this up and I loved it, and I picked this one up. I have many records in this series. It's called the Chamber Music series. Could do an entire video of just chamber music series on Philips. I mean, I picked them all up because basically I love the idea of the series, and for one, and secondly because they're usually really well recorded and they're really beautiful. And Brahms is one of my heroes when I talk about classical music. I mean, for me, he's part of the sort of holy trinity, between Beethoven, Bach, and Brahms. You've got a lot of what followed after it comes from these three guys. Sextet for Strings number 2 in G major, by the Philharmonic Octet of Berlin. Just again, a very deep piece of music, very, very immersive, not challenging, but just magnificent music. And at the same fair, I picked up a lot of CDs. I picked up 100 CDs and records, like altogether, I think, roundabout. I mean, lots and lots of stuff. And I picked up Mishima by Philip Glass, and that's a movie which was scored by Philip Glass, by Francis Ford Coppola and George Lucas. It was produced by these guys, and it's a film by Paul Schrader. And I've not seen the movie, I must say, but the soundtrack is amazing. It's just this minimal meets Oriental music, kind of, opera style type, very operatic, very, very beautiful stuff. Highly recommended. And I also played this CD that I bought the other day, Bela Bartok's Solo Piano Works. So these are a lot of very, very small pieces. There's like 90 tracks on this thing. I mean, it says four or five things, but they're volumes, and there's, like, if you look at individually, there's, I think, like 80 different tracks on these things. They're very, like, they're bagatelles, very small you know, light and airy kind of pieces, and some of them more moody, more sort of like somber. But Bartok is one of my favorites, so was picked it up. This morning, I revisited the great Manchester. I think very under the radar for me. I mean, you know, when you think how much love there is for Joy Division, for example, and what followed, New Order, a certain ratio, I think, where the first act or one of the first acts, I think them or Durity Colin, to be signed on Factory Records. Does it say Factory Records anyway? I'm just holding something. No, probably not. But it's a Factory Records release. Fact 35. There we go. And this is their first proper album, I think. The first, their debut album. And, you know, I mean, what certain ratio are famous really in a way for their brand of like what I call punk funk, which is very loose, funky, elastic bass lines, you know, combined with a very like sort of post-punk kind of aesthetic, prevailing, you know. And I'd put Gang of Four in the same box roughly, and some of the bands from the Bristol scene like Maximum Joy, or I don't know, even to an extent you could put bands like the Slits in there too. But yeah, this is a wonderful record, and it really is. It's what I love about this is that because it's a Martin Hannett production and a Peter Christopherson art direction, who was in Throbbing Gristle, but you've got Martin Hannett producing. You've got this dark, really somber undertone. You know, it really is like Joy Division if Joy Division were funky. You know, beautiful. Here is an obscurity from I think the band from Melbourne, the Metronomes. This is a minimal wave, synthwave record from 1981 with, you know, the usual cast of synths and, you know, treatments and, you know, saxophones. You know, when you think of minimal wave, you know, what do you think of? Features the vocals of Karen Marks, who is well known if you are into the digging culture for her track called Cafe. So if that gives you a bit of a clue about the soundscape of this, the Metronomes. It's a very scarce record, the Metronomes. You find it here and there, but it's one of these kind of like obscurities from the early 80s in Australia. Not quite new wave, kind of steeped in post-punk, but with a very sort of like DIY aesthetic, you know. Well, so is post-punk. Okay, I have a lot of Animal Collective in my collection. I never talk about Animal Collective, but I've got all of their records practically. A band from Brooklyn, you know, featuring, for example, Panda Bear, who I also love. Avitair is in the band too. Geologist, I think they're four dudes. And this is an EP called Fall Be Kind, which came out in the late 2009, okay, late noughties, which I bought at the time actually, and it sort of falls squarely into a sort of experimental rock kind of, you know, indie rock with a strong experimental tinge. You know, kind of some bits are abstract and very sort of ambient at times, but you know, and some a little bit of drone there, here and there, but mostly they're songs. I mean, obviously, and I think personally it's one of my favorite releases of theirs. That and maybe, I don't know, what would be my favorite Animal Collective? Maybe I don't know. They're there. Maybe what do I like? Maybe this album, Sung Tongs. I haven't played for ages, but maybe I'll leave it out to play it. The next, I revisited an album that I don't play very often. It's been on my shelf for years, but I don't play Spaceman III a whole lot. I tend to forget about it a little bit. The Perfect Prescription, which is their album from 1990. Gosh, I don't know. You can look it up. The group, well, legendary group with Jason Pierce and Sonic Boom. Jason Pierce went on to become spiritualized. I mean, it's quite well known. And to me, this is the sort of spirit of the Velvet Underground pushed into the 90s, along with bands like the Jesus and Mary Chain. And you have a strong kind of shoegaze type of feeling there too. I mean, it's not a million miles away from, say, My Bloody Valentine or Ride, but with its own identity. I think I love this record. I should play it more often. Take Me to the Other Side, for example, is one of these songs that I remember discovering, in the early 2000s and thinking, wow, this is old and modern at the same time. It's very, the Velvet Underground comes to mind straight away. In a completely different style, is an album that's filed in my funk section, the Ra band. Ra stands for Richard Hewson. Can't remember what the A stands for. I think it's his middle name. It's called Going Up, and this album is fairly well known for the hit Messages from the Stars. So it's what I would call synth funk. Okay, synth. It's got this kind of like synthy. You can hear bits of Prince in there, bits of what do I get from this? A little bit of that kind of Bernie Worrell kind of sound, from Bernie Worrell, who was in Funkadelic in Parliament, is the keyboard player. But what this synth sound that he just made popular basically, and Prince here as well. It's a fantastic record. It's really super danceable. It's groovy as. Came out in 1980. I don't know. I want to say 1983 or 1984 on Polydor, and I was playing it the other day, and I couldn't believe how danceable this thing is. It's super danceable. For fans of Depeche Mode, this EP, Martin L. Gore, the Counterfeit EP, something that you don't see too often. This is something that I picked up recently, actually, because a copy was available, turned up for a decent price, and I thought, well, I love Depeche Mode, and I'd love to have this. The interesting thing with Depeche Mode and Martin Gore, Martin Gore is the principal songwriter of Depeche Mode. Like, if you listen to Violator and those kinds of like records, it's him. Like, it's his songs. And what's interesting for me is that quite often when he sings, you can't tell the difference between him and Dave Gahan. They almost have the same timbre of voice. And on this, it sings all the songs. It's like a Depeche Mode record, really. And this contains one of my favorite songs ever, which is In a Manner of Speaking, which was a Tuxedo Moon song. I mean, I don't think, under the name Tuxedo Moon, which they're, if you don't know, a band from San Francisco who were on the same label as The Residents, but sort of very different sounding, like post-punk with an experimental sort of tinge. They wrote this song, and then the first time I really heard this song was on this record by a French band called Nouvelle Vague, which is, you know, could be considered a tiny bit cheesy, but I really like their first record. Their covers of post-punk song in a bossa nova kind of way, which is bizarre. Well, hence it's called Nouvelle Vague. They're playing new wave songs in a bossa nova style. All these things mean new wave, bossa nova, Nouvelle Vague. So it's kind of a concept of sorts. But anyway, digressing. Here, it's covered by Martin Gore really, really superbly. And sort of made me buy the record. This is from 1989, just after, or just before Violator. Here is an absolutely magnificent ambient Krauts fourth world record. It is Flux and Mutability, and it's a David Sylvian record, but with Can, basically. It says David Sylvian and Olga Chukai, but it does have Michael Caroli, or Michel Caroli, on guitar, who was the guitar player on Can, in Can. Marcus Stockhausen, the son of Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, and Jaki Liebetzeit, the drummer of Can, plays it. So there's 3 members of Can out of 4. So it's a Can record, recorded live at the Can studio. I mean, you know, that's a Can record, you know, with David Sylvian. But just super atmospheric, you know, just, you know, slow burning, meditative record. Highly recommend. Highly recommend. You can find this, I think, from 1988. In a completely different style, but kind of not awfully different. Here is an interesting little modern release. It's called Ifia Electric. You know, I think it's a sort of like interesting spelling of Africa, I think. And these guys are from Tunisia, the country where my father hailed from, Tunisia, and they do a mix between traditional North African music and industrial music. So, and I think the industrial side of this is stronger than the traditional Tunisian side. So it's a bit like a sort of a Killing Joke record, but from North Africa, if that makes sense. Somebody will stand by this and repeat it. But I just love this. This is brilliant. I'm gonna say that I bought this. I was in a shop and it just looked interesting. It just I didn't know anything about this. It came out in 2019. Didn't know what to expect, but in the end, I'm really loving it. Really loving this record. Very, very industrial. Not in exactly the same style, but it was a beautiful fourth world record. This is Jeff Greinker. It's called Big Weather. I didn't know anything about this record. My friend Amos just gave it to me. It came out in 1994, and it is totally fourth world. If you like John Hassel, if the reference point in your life is John Hassel, you would love this record because it's very John Hassel-esque. Even the hype sticker is very clear about this. Ambient, jazz, tribal, fourth world, avant-garde, left field, psychedelic. John Hassel. Say no more. Here is a beautiful record from Melbourne from the late 90s, 1998. The band's called Hydroplane. I've talked about this before. Hydroplane are I would say, an indie pop record, but with a sort of very Galaxy 500 kind of soundscape. It's a bit of Cocteau Twins, Galaxy 500. That's the sound, the sonic kind of universe in which they exist. Maybe a little bit of Ride as well, you know, that kind of shoegazy dream pop sound. And it was reissued by Efficient Space in 2022, which is when I picked this up, because it just looked and sounded interesting, and I always love revisiting this. The opening track, Verlitzer Jukebox, is very, very indicative of the sounds. Not too far off in the soundscape is In Camera. Here is a great EP called 4 Songs. Okay, so it's 4 songs. Again, this is 4AD. It's a 4AD release from 1980. I think this is an original pressing. There you go. 4AD, the old label. Again, we're in a sort of a crossover between industrial and not shoegaze, because it's probably too early to be shoegaze, but indie pop, a little bit of, again, Dead Can Dance, Cocteau Twins kind of vibe in there. What they call ethereal dark wave, but with a more, maybe a sort of a more industrial kind of side to it. In Camera, beautiful. I revisited Canaxis by Olga Tsukai. We talked about Olga Tsukai a minute ago. I was on a stream with Santi, and he said it was his favorite Can-related album. So I just thought, well, let's just revisit it. And, it's a very, very nice record. There's no question about it. The 2 songs on them are very, they are, opening new ground, if you will, in terms of experimental tape collage, but all the same, I don't think I would return to this as often as I think I would. But that came out in 1980, so 1981, 1969. So yes, it's fairly ahead of its time, I would say. Here's a record that I hadn't played for ages, Ixna, Not Pop. I think they're an American post-punk band. They remind me a lot of something like The Fall, or some of the new wave bands as well, like Suicide or Lydia Lunch. Lydia Lunch fronted The Fall, for example. That's an album that I was in a record store in Melbourne like a few years ago, and it was playing on the speakers, and I said, what is this? And I bought it because it was cool. It's typical of its time. I mean, like it's from the early 80s, and I mean, you can tell that these guys were inspired by the no wave scene. A couple of like ambient experimental records for you. Here is Biosphere. This is Patashnik by Biosphere. Beautiful records. 19, but it's before. This is prior to Substrata, so it's prior to 97. So 95 or whatever it is, I think. And it is very sort of quiet and tranquil and serene as an album. It's very sort of and lovely drony qualities to it. I really like this record. It's a great nocturnal record, I think, for me. Biosphere is from Norway or Sweden, Norway maybe. The fantastic surrounds that I've played by Yoshimura, a classic of the Japanese ambient scene. I don't know if I maybe talked about this already a couple of weeks ago. Don't know. But yes, an ambient drony classic, obviously. I also, and now the last few things I'm going to show you, I've got 4 or 5 jazz-ish records, and then I'll stop because I'm talking for too long. Now, this is a record that is a recent reissue. It's a compilation reissue, but I was quite happy to pick it up. This is Atmosphere Jazz Funk from Luxembourg, 1981-1986. So there's an album called Atmosphere Jazz Rock, which came out in 1981, and for years and years it was on my want list, and I never sort of, for some reason, I never came across a copy, and then sort of forgot about it. And it's kind of typical of its time. It's jazz funk from the early 80s, Euro jazz funk, with, it's got a little bit of Placebo meets sort of Henry Cow kind of, like it's got this kind of like slightly experimental but also kind of loose and funky. And so this year they've put out the best tracks of that album and the other album they made into this package, pressed to 300 copies, I think. And a local store had that, so I just picked it up, and I just love what they've done with the cover. It's just beautiful. So, and it was cheap, so I thought, yeah, screw it, I'll get it. It's super good. Atmosphere Jazz Rock, Luxembourg. I replayed the mighty Steve Lacy Reflections. Steve Lacy plays Thelonious Monk with Mal Waldron on piano and Alvin Jones on drums. Say no more. This is a masterpiece, this record, Reflections. No home should be without one. Yeah. It's Monk. It's Monk, played by Steve Lacy. What else do you want me to say? Here is a new record from Melbourne, a Melbourne jazz record, just released about 3 weeks ago. The band is called Flux Score 94. I don't know if you can see that on the thing. It looks like fucking techno record, doesn't it? But it's not a techno record. It's got, if you like Mild Life, 3070, which are local bands, that's in the same vein. It's just a modern jazz record, some vocals on it, which are very, very palatable. They're young guys, and I just felt like supporting them, because it's nice music, and I love collecting those modern local records, because they're just part of our times and our scene, and this is where I live. So I bought 2 copies of it. I bought one for my friend Amos, and he really enjoyed it. So I'm glad I can support them in that way. Here is a record that I revisited that is really, kind of took me by surprise. I saw someone show this record recently in the VC and sort of went, oh, I need to play this again. And it's a really great, that's pretty much the only Pat Metheny record I have, but apart from the record with Ornette Coleman. But this is a really, really, really cool record, 1982. Has moments that are just really off-kilter. The opening track, notably, Barcarolle, it's called, with Nana Vasconcelos playing percussion, is an amazing piece of ECM jazz. It just took me by surprise. Off ramp. A couple more and I'll be finished. I'll be out of your way. Mind you don't have to watch all this. This I picked up recently. It's the one of the newest reissues of the Jazz Dispensary, boutique series, whatever it's called. The sticker is in there. What is it called? Top Shelf series. Johnny Lytle. People in Love. This is a killer vibes jazz record. My God, it maybe is the best vibes vibraphone jazz record I've ever heard. It's just fucking, it's lit, this record. It's really, really amazing. Turn the volume on this thing. I'll let you appreciate the lineup and the instruments that we've got there: flute, alto, electric piano, congas, harp. Oh. Smoking. And finally, last but not least, is a soul record, which I love. I've been playing a lot of Cleo Soul recently. Cleo Soul is one of the vocalists in Salt, and she's made some really beautiful records, solo records. She's made 4 of them, and they're all amazing. I mean, this is, to me, the best modern soul that I can think of. It's really is superb. A latest record, which is here, which I've got here. I'm just going to pull this record here. Is, I think, one of the best records of this year. So that's Cleo Soul. And that's the record before that, from 2023. And again, an absolute tour de force of modern soul, really classy, really elegant, just superb. Okay, it's a bit long, but you know what you're gonna do. Watch it if you want. Don't watch it if you don't want to. Leave me some comments, talk to me, all that. Love you all.